All right, welcome back to the channel. Now, I've got some constitutional challenges here that I'm going to go through because some people are challenging the interpretation of the Constitution as to what powers the government and specifically the federal government has in deporting people. Do they have the right to search people? Do they have the right to go into people's houses without a warrant? Do they even have a right to deport people? Those are the questions that we have, and it's a good challenge. I would say it's a good challenge because they're referring directly to the Constitution itself. But first, we got to check out this article here from MSN about robocops deployed in Chinese cities. Oh, that's an ad. Artificial intelligence-powered robot police officers have begun appearing on the streets of several Chinese cities, adding a whiff of sci-fi novelty to basic traffic and safety duties. Newsweek has contacted the Chinese Ministry of Industry and Information Technology for comment by email. Why it matters. These machines are among the latest example of China's advances in humanoid robots, and industry president Xi Jinping touted during his New Year's Eve address. China has also poured resources into artificial intelligence in recent years, applying it across transportation, logistics, manufacturing, and public services. What to know? Pedestrians and cyclists in Wuhu, a city in eastern China's Anhui province, have been receiving traffic instructions from Intelligent Police Unit R001, manufactured by AI Moga Robotics, according to the state-owned Xinhua News. For your safety, please ride bicycles in the non-motorized lane, the automation said after spotting a cyclist riding in the car lane per the outlet. So there's the robot cop there. This is just the first robot cop. Not much to it. Just enough to kind of get you used to it. They've also had robot dogs. A couple other things. Okay, what happens next? The Development Research Center of the State Council projects China's embodied intelligence industry, or AI built into physical robotic systems, will reach a market size of 400 billion yuan, or about $56.5 billion by 2030, and surpass 1 trillion yuan by 2035. So that's going to be a big industry. Lots of jobs taken away by robots. All right. We're not going to do the, we can't do the gas thing too. Okay, so I checked on the green gas, and this is just one article. I checked a couple other ones. They didn't really know what it was, but apparently it's just colored, like stuff, combustibles that causes it to turn green. And it's mainly for a psychological effect to make people think that they might be getting poisoned or something. But in actuality, the regular tear gas, it says down here that the regular tear gas is actually more toxic. But compared with the CS tear gas pocket grenade, which deploys the kind of tear gas protesters are likely more familiar with, the gas grenades have a smaller number of toxic constituents. If exposures are equal, I would consider the CS tear gas pocket grenade to be more toxic than the smoke pocket grenade. The green dyed smoke suggests highly toxicity to protesters, but he adds the effect is more psychological. All right. So maybe they're lying. Maybe it does have all types of toxic chemicals in it or something. Who knows? Could be lying. There's always that case. Okay, we're not going to get into the income tax right now, but maybe later. All right. Here we go. Legalknowledgebase.com. Do constitutional rights apply to everyone? What rights are not protected by the Constitution? The Supreme Court has found that unenumerated rights include such important rights as the right to travel, the right to vote, and the right to keep personal matters private. So Non-citizens are not guaranteed the right to travel, the right to vote, or the right to keep personal matters private. Does the Fourth Amendment apply to non-citizens? Among many classifications of constitutional rights, one important distinction is that some apply to non-citizens and some do not. For instance, Fourth Amendment protections from unwarranted searches and seizures largely apply regardless of citizenship. Right? So, who is not protected by the Fourth Amendment? Generally, a person has no reasonable expectation of privacy for property or personal effects if they hold open to the public. The Fourth Amendment does not protect things that are visible or in plain view for a person of ordinary or unenhanced vision. Okay, so yeah, people have the same basic rights, right? Like you can't just beat up a immigrant for no reason or take all their stuff for no reason, right? The Supreme Court, however, beginning as early as 1923 and continuing through its recent decision, has broadly read the liberty guarantee of the 14th Amendment to guarantee a fairly broad right of privacy that has come to encompass decisions about child rearing, procreation, marriage, and termination. Okay, so what are the three rights that are allowed to non US citizens? Right to life, liberty, and security of the person. Protection from arbitrary detention. We're going to get to that in a second. Freedom from torture and cruel, inhumane punishment, of course. Protection from refoulement. Liberty of movement and the right to enter one's own country. Protection from arbitrary expulsion. Okay. Do illegals have rights? In short, anyone, regardless of citizenship, residency, or immigration status, can have civil rights in the United States as they are protected under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, sex, religion, or national origin. Yes, when it comes to key constitutional provisions like due process and the equal treatment under the law, the U.S. Constitution applies to all persons, which includes both documented and undocumented immigrants, not just U.S. citizens. Okay. What do Constitution protections not apply to? Although the coverage of most of the Bill of Rights has been expanded to the actions of state and local governments, it does not generally apply to private conduct. With some exceptions, private persons and organizations do not have to comply with the Constitution. Who is not protected by this amendment? Private people, businesses, and organizations are not bound by the First Amendment. Okay. Examples of civil rights include the right to vote, right to fair trial, right to government services. Who will be excluded from entering the United States? General categories of inadmissibility include health, criminal activity, national security, public charge, meaning people don't want immigrants, lack of labor certification if required, fraud and misrepresentation, prior removals, unlawful presence in the United States, and several miscellaneous categories. Okay. All right. So the Constitution doesn't give them every protection of the Constitution. This is again going over the difference between a persons and a citizen and how the 14th and 4th Amendment says all persons. The Fourth Amendment protects people. Okay, so that's true. That is true. But we're going to look at some court cases. Okay. While many constitutional protections are universal, some rights are reserved exclusively for U.S. citizens. One of the most significant examples is the right to vote in federal elections. Federal law generally makes it illegal for non citizens to vote for offices such as president, vice president, or members of Congress, while some jurisdictions may have different rules for local elections. What? See what I'm saying? The overall structure of federal voting rights is tied to citizenship. Another right reserved for citizens is the ability to hold certain federal offices. The Constitution sets specific requirements for those who wish to serve as a representative, senator, or president. For example, a person must be a natural born citizen to be eligible for the presidency. These limitations distinguish the political rights of citizens who participate in self governance from the fundamental human rights that the Constitution provides to everyone on U.S. soil. During a removal hearing, individuals have several procedural protections. They have the right to present evidence, examine the evidence against them, and cross examine the witness. They may also apply for various forms of relief, such as asylum, if they meet specific legal requirements. However, unlike in criminal court, the government is not required to provide a lawyer for free. While the individuals have the privilege of being represented by an attorney, they must hire one at their own expense. In some situations, such as when individuals are apprehended at or near the border, the government may use expedited removal processes. These streamlined procedures can lead to a person being removed without a full hearing before the judge. However, even in these cases, if a person expresses fear of persecution or an intention to apply for asylum, they must be referred for a credible fear interview to determine if they should be placed in further proceedings. Now, a Mexican cannot claim this because Mexico is a anarchist paradise, apparently, where no one ever gets hurt. And so therefore they're not in fear, right, of being persecuted because it happens all the time. Mexico doesn't like beat and kill their citizens when they cross the US border, right, and then cross back. Okay, so we're going to get deeper into this. Okay, this is from the Heritage Foundation. It said, regardless of their legal status, aliens are entitled to the same constitutional due process rights provided to criminal defendants who are citizens when they are being criminally prosecuted for assault, rape, burglary, kidnapping, murder, or other crimes. However, immigration proceedings to bar an alien's entry or to remove or deport an alien present inside the United States are not criminal proceedings, as the Supreme Court of the United States first outlined in 1893 in Fong Yu Ting versus the United States, a decision in which it rejected habeas corpus petitions filed by Chinese citizens who claimed that they were being unlawfully detained by U.S. Marshals without due process of law. All right, so we're going to go check out this case here. And this is what the judge said. The courts went on to say, to preserve its independence and the security against foreign aggression and encroachment is the highest duty of every nation. And to attain these ends, nearly all other considerations are to be subordinated. It matters not in what form such aggression and encroachment come, whether from the foreign nation acting in its national character, or from vast hordes of its people crowding in upon us. The government, possessing the powers which are to be exercised for protection and security, is clothed with the authority to determine the occasion on which the powers shall be called forth, and its determination, so far as the subjects affected are concerned, is necessarily conclusive upon all its departments and officers. If, therefore, the government of the United States, through its legislative department, considers the presence of foreigners of a different race in this country who will not assimilate with us, to be dangerous to its peace and security. Their exclusion is not to be stayed because at the time there are no actual hostilities with the nation of which the foreigners are subjects. The existence of war would render the necessity of the proceeding only more obvious and pressing. The same necessity, in a less pressing degree, may arise when war does not exist, and the same authority which adjudges the necessity in one case must also determine it in the other. In both cases, its determination is conclusive upon the judiciary, meaning they can get a warrant from a judge. If the government of the country of which the foreigners excluded are subjects is dissatisfied with this action, it can make complaint to the executive head of our government, the president, or resort to any other measure which, in its judgment, its interest or dignity may demand, and there lies its only remedy. The power of the government to exclude foreigners from the country whenever, in its judgment, the public interest requires such exclusion has been asserted in repeated instances and never denied by the executive or legislative departments. So basically what they're saying here, as you can see, is that they're basically saying that foreign subjects of a foreign country are enemy combatants, and that basically if they invaded your country during a war with guns, would you have to give them a fair trial? Would you have to give each individual soldier, Chinese soldier, I'm not saying China's going to invade us, but in this, each foreign soldier that invades your country with a gun, now you have to give each one of them a due process trial? Oh, well, we're going to shoot you in the war, but no, wait. 14th Amendment. Sorry. Now they're like coming through with like guns and they're holding up the 14th Amendment on the end of their musket bayonet swords on the end of their muskets. And they're like, "Oh, 14th Amendment can't do anything to us. You have to give us a fair trial," while they're marching toward you with guns, right? Obviously, that's obviously not the case, right? And so he's saying that the same logic that applies in that situation, if they were marching towards you with guns, you don't have to give them a fair trial. And in this case, we can just classify them as enemy combatants because they've entered the country illegally. And especially, he's saying, especially when there's a lot of them, when there's a mass of them, it doesn't matter if they're just walking around or if they're running through your country with guns. It's the same thing. It's considered the same thing. And that the fact is that they're not being detained. Their life and their liberty is not being taken away from them. They're just being sent back to their own country in which they're subjects of. No one's taking their life. Their liberty is to go to their country. They're freely liberated to go back to their own country. That's what this is saying. And that's what he's saying. He's saying the existence of war would render the necessity of proceeding only more obvious and pressing. The same necessity, in a less pressing degree, may arise when war does not exist, and the same authority which adjudges the necessity in the case of war must also determine it in the case of peacetime. That's what he's saying. And so they're saying that no, the federal government, the legislative or the executive branch has the power to remove anyone from the country that is not a legal citizen or legal resident at any time they want, under the clause that they are basically an enemy combatant. Right? That's what it says. And then if they want to come back in the country, then they can have their government call our government and work something out. But you can't just walk into the United States and say, "Hey, I'm here now." Right? We can't kill you. We can't beat you up, and maybe you have money or something like that. They're really not allowed to steal that. I'm sure they are. I'm sure they probably are. But they're not allowed to. but they're not allowed to beat you up. And I mean, sure, there's always going to be some abuses, but I think in general, it would be like the same as saying like, well, you know, there was that one group of guys in what's it called, in Afghanistan. They raped that like 14-year-old girl that kept on going through the checkpoint because she had huge boobs. So does that mean that every military guy is now a rapist? Because that did happen, right? It was like there was this girl and she was going through the checkpoint. She had huge boobs. They're like calling her out every day. And then eventually they just went to her house, killed her parents, and raped her. And this was like in the Afghanistan war. So not that long ago. So should we start saying that every soldier is a rapist? Maybe we should say, maybe you join the military to rape people. Maybe that's why you wanted to join the military, so that you could rape people, because you're definitely a rapist if you join the military, right? It's stupid. Okay, yeah, there's some abuses going on, but does that mean because some abuses are going on that invalidates the entire law, right? Because some people get beat up in jail. Does that mean that we shouldn't put people in jail for committing crimes at all? No, we should fix the jails, make the jails better, make it so that people that are in there for like small offenses like traffic tickets and you know, child support don't have to be worried about getting beat up by a 10-time murderer with a 50-time life sentence, right? But it doesn't. This is just, that's what this is saying, that it's an encroachment. They started the encroachment. So when you're talking about, oh, the protest, well, the ICE isn't allowed to stop illegal immigrants, so the protesters are right for impeding the ICE. No, they're not, because the first aggression was when the illegal immigrant, the undocumented immigrant, crossed our border. That was the first aggression. They aggressed against us. Trespass. They trespassed against us, which is a form of aggression and encroachment. So they encroached on our thing, and we have the right, the legislative and executive branch have the right to now remove them. And because it's a civil matter and not a criminal matter, they don't get the same due process. Yes, if we were trying them for murder, then we still have to give them a trial for murder. We can't just say, oh, well, you're an illegal immigrant, an undocumented immigrant, so therefore you murdered somebody, and then we just get to throw you in jail. But they don't get the same due process when they're just being detained. Like, that's what it says. They don't get the habeas corpus. They don't get to say, oh, well, I'm being detained by the government, and I demand my rights, and I demand that I be released from detainment. Right, this is a long court case, but I don't know if I'll be able to find that part. But it's in this article anyway. And this article is obviously factual, right? Because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, well, hey, I'm being detained by the government, and you're not allowed to do that because of the 14th Amendment. So if a troop of soldiers was marching across the United States and they had the 14th Amendment stuck to their muskets, then they're allowed to stay in the country? Or we have to give each one an individual criminal trial and decide whether or not they should be allowed to stay in the country while they're shooting at us, right? And that's exactly what this is saying. So a link to this is in the description. I'm going to get out of here. I've probably been going on too long already. But you can see that, yes, we can't beat up people and take all their stuff and do a bunch of torture and all that other stuff. That is clearly wrong from any standpoint, any sane person in the modern world. I mean, maybe if they're raping 12-year-old children, then I would turn a blind eye to them getting beat the crap out of. But for just a regular average person just crossing the border, yes, that is wrong. But it is also wrong to make the claim that we have no right to remove these people from the country. Like, it's just not true. Right? It's right here that The existence of war would render the necessity of the proceedings only more obvious and pressing. The same necessity in a less pressing degree may arise when war does not exist, and the same authority which adjudges the necessity in one case must also determine it in the other. So that's what it means, that if we were at war with these people, we wouldn't have to give them a court case. And so therefore, we don't have to give them a court case when they're just walking around either. All right. Thanks for watching the video. If you did, have a good day and peace.